Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and share my videos. The convoy drifted through the edge of the Belther expanse, a line of steel hulls glowing faintly against the canvas of stars. 6 freighters carried minerals and rare alloys, their holds stacked with the sort of cargo that fueled fleets and forged weapons. 3 escorts flanked them, their smaller frames bristling with defensive cannons. The mission was routine, but the silence of this sector had always carried an ominous weight. Captain Elias Rourke stood on the bridge of the lead freighter, his hands clasped behind his back. He had seen 20 years of service across colonial routes, yet unease settled into him like a shadow he could not shake. He scanned the empty void and spoke without turning. "What do you see, Lieutenant?" The younger man at the sensors swallowed before answering. "Nothing, sir. No drift, no anomalies. Too clean." Rourke nodded slowly. That was the problem. Space near alien borders was never this quiet. Raiders prowled in swarms, picking apart isolated transports, but today the emptiness stretched unbroken. His instinct screamed that it was not safety but a trap. He leaned closer to the viewport, as if the stars themselves might reveal their secret. The alarm cut through the silence. Red strobes painted the bridge walls, and the lieutenant's voice rose an octave. "Multiple contacts inbound. They're everywhere, sir." Before Rourke could issue an order, the black around them shattered. Jagged vessels erupted from hyperspace, their hulls resembling shards of obsidian fused with muscle. They moved with predatory precision, surrounding the convoy in a tightening noose. Rourke's throat went dry. He had read the reports, but no words had ever captured the terror of seeing Carvetha's warband firsthand. "Raise shields. Deploy counterfire," Rourke barked, forcing steel into his voice. Cannons from the escorts roared, spitting lines of light into the dark. Several alien skimmers dissolved in bursts of fire, but the rest pressed forward, undeterred. Their ships struck with spikes that pierced hull plating, locking onto the freighters like leeches. The deck shuddered under Rourke's boots. He gripped a rail and watched as boarding pods slammed into the convoy, disgorging armored figures. Alien warriors surged into the corridors, their forms massive and angular, each step shaking the metal floor. Blades glimmered with energy that hissed as it split armor and bone alike. Rourke's men fought desperately. He glimpsed one Marine firing point-blank into a Warlord's chest, only for the creature to rip the rifle from his grasp and crush him against a bulkhead. Blood smeared across steel, and the Marine's scream cut short. Rourke drew his sidearm, firing down the passage, but for every alien that fell, 2 more replaced it. On the comms, voices shouted and broke into static. "Hull breach in aft, they're inside the," then silence. The escorts were gone, their signals swallowed in fire. The freighters were being gutted one by one, helpless prey in the Predator's maw. Rourke ordered the remaining crew to fall back toward the command deck. Sweat trickled down his neck as he sealed blast doors, but the pounding of alien fists on the other side told him it would not hold. He had known defeat before, but never so swift, never so absolute. Still, he lifted his weapon again, determined that if his ship fell, it would not fall quietly. The command doors burst open. A towering figure stepped through, broader than any soldier Rourke had ever seen. Armor plated in black and bronze covered his frame, and in his clawed hand he held a hooked glaive that hummed with contained fury. His tusked jaw curled in a snarl, and his eyes burned like embers. This was Carveth the Dismantler, warlord of the Broken Spiral, conqueror of half a dozen sectors. To see him in person was to feel the weight of a predator who believed himself invincible. "You fight like insects," Carveth rumbled, his voice thick and resonant. He surveyed the survivors with disdain, as if debating whether to crush them or cage them. "Your ships are mine. Your people are mine. And your Earth will kneel." Rourke forced himself to meet the alien's gaze. "Humanity doesn't kneel," he spat, though his voice cracked. The glaive spun once in Carvetha's grip, and its edge rested at Rourke's throat. The alien smiled, if the cruel twist of his mouth could be called a smile. "You will beg for mercy," Carveth said. "And Earth will send a savior to plead with me." He laughed, a sound like stone grinding against stone. Around him, warriors bound the survivors in chains and dragged them toward the Warlords' flagship. Hours blurred into captivity. Rourke and the remnants of his convoy were thrown into a cavernous hold, shackled and forced to kneel beneath the gaze of guards. The air stank of oil and blood. He listened to the guttural language of their captors, picking out enough to understand their plans. The crew would be sold across systems, scattered until no trace remained of them as Terrans. His jaw clenched. He knew that to aliens like Carveth, humanity was not an enemy to be feared, only a resource to be exploited. But then, a flicker of hope. Amid the chaos of the assault, the convoy's emergency beacon had transmitted before the jammers cut them off. A narrow pulse of light had slipped past the curtain of interference, its code buried deep enough that only Earth Command would recognize it. Rourke replayed that thought again and again, like a prayer against despair. Someone would come. Someone had to come. On the alien flagship's command deck, Carveth leaned upon his throne of fused bone and iron. He drank from a vessel shaped from the skull of some long-dead beast, his laughter echoing as reports of victory arrived. One of his lieutenants, smaller but keen-eyed, shifted uneasily. The Terrans, the lieutenant growled in their tongue, they will answer. They will send ships. Carveth sneered. Then let them come. I want their savior's head mounted here, so every world remembers what happens when they resist me. The lieutenant lowered his gaze, though unease remained etched in every motion. For whispers had traveled far, even to the broken spiral. Whispers of a man Earth sent not as a diplomat, not as a rescuer, but as something altogether different. A name that curdled the blood of raiders and drew silence in war councils. The Terrans did not always send saviors. Sometimes, they sent him. Back on Earth, in a chamber buried deep beneath command, the distress code pulsed across a console. The general studying it said nothing for a long moment, then looked at the officers arrayed before him. His voice was flat when he spoke. Assemble the black file. It's time. A murmur rippled through the room, and one of the younger men shifted nervously. Sir, should we not prepare a rescue fleet? The general shook his head. His eyes were cold, his jaw set. This is not a mission for rescue. Send Kane. Darius Kane stood in the dim light of the war chamber, the weight of silence pressing heavier than the reinforced walls around him. His face was weathered, lined not by age alone but by years of violence carried out in humanity's name. A scar traced from the edge of his jaw to his temple, pale against his dark skin, the only outward reminder of a life spent on battlefields where few survived. His eyes, cold and unblinking, were the true scars, and the generals who summoned him could not hold their gaze on his for long. The transmission from the captured convoy replayed on a suspended holoscreen. Images flickered, boarding claws tearing into human ships, soldiers dragged away in chains, the looming shadow of the warlord Carveth. Kane's lips did not so much as twitch. He had seen such things before, countless times, in systems that no longer existed. The general who had spoken his name cleared his throat, trying and failing to mask the tremor in it. Carveth has taken the convoy and their escorts. We believe he intends to ransom survivors or disperse them as slaves. Standard fleet action risks escalation, and our allies would protest a direct assault. The general hesitated, then forced the words out. We require you. Kane leaned forward, resting scarred hands on the table. His voice was low, rough from years of shouting through combat masks and smoke. You don't require me to rescue them. You require me to kill him. The words hung in the air, unadorned, undeniable. The general swallowed and gave a curt nod. Earth cannot allow Carveth to grow bolder. If he believes us weak, the warlords will swarm. The message must be final. He gestured toward Kane. You are the message. Kane pushed away from the table. His mind did not linger on the plea, nor on the captives waiting in chains across the stars. He had no illusions about why he existed. He was not a savior. He was a weapon sharpened for one purpose, to make the galaxy fear Earth. He spoke without looking back. Prepare the ship. Hours later, the executioner's vessel slipped free of dock, a dark frigate that carried no insignia, no banners, nothing but its name whispered in shadows. The crew numbered fewer than 40, each one handpicked, each one hardened by years of service. Yet even among veterans, Kane's presence was unsettling. In the mess, men whispered about him as though summoning a ghost. Some called him the Black Wolf, a predator who hunted through silence. Others lowered their voices when his footsteps approached, unwilling to test whether his hearing matched his reputation. One young officer, Lieutenant Mercer, finally dared to speak to him as they reviewed the approach vectors. "Sir," he began cautiously, "the distress call, it came from survivors. There could still be time to save them." Kane's gaze shifted to him, calm but heavy enough to still the air. "If they live when I arrive, they'll be freed. But that isn't the mission." His tone was flat, drained of comfort or cruelty, a simple statement of fact. Mercer nodded, but unease lingered in his eyes. Kane returned to the tactical readouts, as if the exchange had never happened. The frigate cut through the dark like a knife, its hull coated in layers that swallowed scanning beams. Inside, Kane prepared. He stripped and reassembled his weapons with a ritualistic precision, his hands steady despite the turbulence of hyperspace. A compact rifle, a combat blade etched with hairline grooves for conductivity, charges designed to rupture power cores, tools of a man who never expected help, who never offered mercy. Each motion was deliberate, each weapon an extension of himself. When he allowed himself moments of stillness, memories rose unbidden. A battlefield on Vela Prime, where he had stood among thousands of alien corpses, the soil slick with blood. A raid on the frontier, where he had watched his squad torn apart before his eyes and realized only he had the will to finish the fight. Those memories no longer caused him pain. They simply reminded him what he had become. The frigate emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the broken spiral. The alien stronghold stretched across the void, a sprawl of jagged fortresses bound together by chains of metal and energy. Dozens of warships patrolled its perimeter, their hulls bristling with crude but deadly armaments. The crew studied the site in silence, but Kane did not flinch. He studied it as one might study prey, noting the rhythm of patrols, the blind spots in overlapping scans, the thin veins that could be cut to bleed the beast. "Shall I plot a concealed approach, sir?" Mercer asked, voice hushed, as if the enemy might already hear. Kane shook his head. "No. Let them see us." The crew exchanged startled glances, but none dared protest. He explained with the same calm certainty that unnerved them. "Fear begins before the killing. One of their scouts will escape. It will carry my name to him. That is the first strike." Moments later, the frigate advanced, cloak partially lifted, enough for sensors to detect its silhouette. Patrol ships swarmed, hungry for an easy kill. Kane's hands moved across controls with mechanical precision. Pulse beams carved through the first scout, its body blossoming into fire. The second met the same fate. The third was allowed to flee. Kane watched the flashing signal as it retreated into the spiral's heart. His lips pressed into the faintest shadow of a smile. On the flagship of Carveth, alarms shrieked as the report reached the throne. The warlord rose from his seat, his tusks gleaming in the harsh light. "Who dares?" he thundered. His lieutenants muttered in uneasy tones, their faces tight. One of them whispered a name, and the chamber fell into an unnatural hush. "The executioner," the lieutenant rasped. "Earth has sent Kane." Carveth barked a laugh that rumbled like thunder, though the sound carried a strain of defiance rather than certainty. "Good. Let him come. I will break him before my warriors and hang his skull above this throne." His words were bold, but in the stillness that followed, even his most loyal captains shifted uneasily. They had heard the stories, as all had. Fleets burned, planets silenced, entire clans reduced to ash because Kane had been sent. In the depths of space, Kane stood on the bridge of his frigate, watching the alien formation scatter before reforming. He saw their movements, felt their hesitation, and knew the fear was beginning to take root. His hand rested lightly on the edge of the console as he spoke, his voice as steady as the void outside. "Now," he murmured, though no one had asked a question, "the hunt begins." The alien stronghold loomed like a broken crown, its jagged spires linked by bridges of energy that pulsed with an unnatural rhythm. Patrol ships wove through the darkness, their lights sweeping across the void like restless predators. Yet inside that restless swarm, silence had already begun to spread. It was not the silence of peace, but the silence of prey realizing it was being hunted. Kane's frigate lingered at the edge of detection, cloaked in shadow. He stood on the narrow deployment platform, fastening the harness of his boarding armor. Around him, 4 operatives checked their gear, men who had followed him before and carried the scars to prove it. None spoke. None dared to. Kane adjusted the blade at his side and loaded the rifle across his chest. His expression never changed, but his presence steadied them more than words ever could. The boarding pods detached, small spheres of reinforced alloy that cut through space with barely a whisper. They slipped between the blind spots Kane had studied, each trajectory calculated to avoid overlapping scans. The alien fleet, vast as it was, did not notice 4 small sparks threading through its teeth. When the pods struck the outer hull of Carvetha's flagship, they burrowed silently, leaving only faint scorch marks where they disappeared. Inside the hold, Captain Rourke strained against his restraints as the lights above flickered. He had been counting the hours since capture, each one a nail hammered into hope. Guards barked in guttural tones, dragging men away in pairs, returning without them. Whispers circulated among the prisoners that Carveth had begun selling them already, carving humanity into pieces to scatter across the spiral. Rourke fought to smother despair, but his hands trembled when he thought of those he had sworn to protect. The flicker came again, longer this time. The guards cursed, tapping at their devices. A moment later, one collapsed, throat opening in a thin red line. Another raised his weapon, but a shadow moved faster, snapping his neck before he could fire. The prisoners froze, breath caught in their throats. From the darkness, a figure stepped forward, helmeted, armored in matte black that reflected nothing. His rifle spat once, and another alien fell. Then he vanished again, absorbed into the gloom as if the shadows themselves obeyed him. Who was that? One of the prisoners whispered, voice breaking. Rourke did not answer. He remembered the name spoken in dread tones, the weapon Earth sent when fear was not enough. He realized, with equal measures of relief and terror, that the man in the shadows was not here for them. He was here for slaughter. Kane moved through the corridors with mechanical precision. Every step was measured, every shot purposeful. He cut power conduits, disabled coolant lines, and left charges tucked into ventilation shafts. As he advanced deeper into the flagship, systems began to fail. Lights dimmed to a sickly glow, engines stuttered, and the once orderly cadence of alien patrols dissolved into frantic chatter. Panic spread faster than the damage itself. In the command chamber, Carvetha's lieutenants shouted over one another as reports poured in. Sections 5 through 7 unresponsive. Shields flickering across the lower decks. We are losing men without alarms triggered. Carveth rose from his throne, towering above them, tusks bared. His voice silenced the chaos. It is Kane, he growled, naming the ghost that haunted their senses. The executioner walks among us. The fear in the room was palpable. Warriors who had laughed in the face of fleets now shifted in unease. They had heard the stories, ships vanishing in silence, commanders slain in their own halls, whole warbands reduced to wreckage with no survivors to tell how. Yet their warlord's pride left no room for hesitation. Carveth struck his glaive against the floor, sending sparks leaping into the air. Let him come, he thundered. This ship is my throne, and I will crush him beneath it. The words did little to steady his soldiers. Somewhere deep inside the vessel, another explosion rocked the hull. Emergency alarms shrieked, and the lights died completely, plunging half the flagship into darkness. Alien voices shouted, but the responses came only in echoes of gunfire and sudden silence. Kane's presence was not announced, it was felt, like the pressure of a predator breathing down one's neck. Rourke pulled against his chains again as more guards hurried past, leaving the prisoners in their panic. He knew they had been abandoned, left to rot while their masters scrambled to contain the intruder. His eyes searched the shadows, hoping for another glimpse of the armored figure. When Kane appeared again, dragging the body of a fallen alien and dropping it wordlessly at the prisoner's feet, Rourke forced the courage to speak. "You're here," he said, voice raw, "to save us." Kane's visor turned toward him, the reflection of dim lights giving no hint of his expression. His voice came low, clipped, unyielding. "I'm here for Carveth." He cut the chains with a sweep of his blade, not as an act of mercy but because they hindered his movement. Rourke rubbed at his wrists, staring at the man who had just confirmed what he feared. This was no savior. This was Earth's weapon, walking carnage given human shape. As Kane moved on, the prisoners followed at a distance, some too frightened to remain, others desperate enough to trust even the executioner. Rourke whispered to them, though he was not sure if he sought to reassure them or himself. "We are pawns in his war. Do not mistake his path for ours." Kane pressed deeper into the flagship, leaving corpses in his wake. His charges detonated behind him, crippling power conduits and sending fire crawling through the decks. Alien crews screamed into comms, their voices distorted by feedback as their systems failed. Kane intercepted the transmissions, replaying fragments across open channels, letting the Warlords' own men hear their comrades' dying fear. It was not enough to kill them. They needed to know they were being hunted. Carveth watched the chaos unfold on a failing holomap, his fury twisting into something darker. "He toys with us," the Warlord snarled, tusks grinding together. "Enough of this. Seal the inner halls. Draw him to me." He raised his glaive, its edge burning like captured lightning. "If he wants me, let him take me face to face." Kane heard the order, or perhaps he simply knew it was coming. He cut through the final barricade, stepping into a corridor lined with the bodies of those who had thought to stop him. The air was thick with smoke, sparks spitting from broken conduits. At the far end, the great doors to the throne room loomed, their surface scorched and battered but unyielding. Kane reloaded his rifle with calm efficiency, then placed his hand on the metal, feeling the vibrations of movement within. He whispered words only he could hear, a ritual he had carried across a lifetime of hunts, and then he planted the final charge. The blast tore the doors from their hinges, fire and smoke billowing into the chamber. Alien warriors stumbled back, blinded and disoriented. Through the haze, Kane stepped forward, a silhouette framed by ruin. His voice carried across the chamber, cold and certain. "Your war is over, Carveth. Mine begins now." The Warlord rose from his throne, eyes burning with rage, his glaive spinning in his grasp. The chamber shook with the roar of his warriors, but beneath their cries was something deeper, an undercurrent none could ignore. The throne chamber filled with the roar of alien warriors, their voices merging into a storm that rattled the walls. Sparks rained from shattered conduits, and smoke coiled upward, choking the air. Kane advanced through the haze, his rifle low, his eyes fixed only on the figure rising at the far end. Carveth stood from his throne, a mountain of armor and muscle, glaive crackling with arcs of energy. His tusks glistened in the light of burning consoles, and his laughter rumbled like thunder. "So this is Earth's weapon," the Warlord growled, stepping down from his dais. "A man who stalks shadows and murders cowards. Show me your strength, Terran. Show me you deserve the fear you inspire." Kane said nothing. He set his rifle aside and drew the blade at his hip, a weapon plain in design but sharp enough to part steel. He understood the challenge for what it was. Carveth did not want another ambush, another silent kill. He wanted a spectacle, a duel that would prove his supremacy before his men. Kane would grant him that, but not for pride. Only for the certainty of the message. The first clash echoed like cannon fire. Carveth swung his glaive in a wide arc, sparks showering as it scraped across Kane's guard. The force drove him back a step, boots grinding against scorched metal. Kane countered with a thrust that sliced across the Warlord's side, but the armor turned most of the blow. Carveth laughed again, unshaken. "You are smaller than I imagined," he taunted, pressing forward. "Do you think your frail form can stand against me?" Kane moved with precision rather than brute force, letting the larger warrior's momentum carry him past, striking at exposed joints, slashing where armor met flesh. Each blow was efficient, deliberate, never wasted. But Carveth endured them with snarling defiance, his glaive weaving in violent arcs that forced Kane to retreat again and again. The chamber trembled with every impact, each clash a test of will as much as skill. Around them, alien soldiers formed a ring, their shouts turning from triumph to unease as the duel stretched on. Kane's strikes grew bloodier. A slice across the Warlord's thigh slowed his charge. A stab into the shoulder made his glaive dip for the first time. Yet Carveth's fury seemed endless, each wound fueling his rage. With a bellow, the Warlord swung his glaive in a devastating sweep. Kane ducked beneath it, the blade shearing through a stone pillar, sparks exploding in all directions. He rolled, came up low, and drove his combat knife into Carveth's side with both hands. The alien roared, spinning and smashing Kane across the chamber with a single blow from his gauntlet. Kane struck the wall hard enough to dent steel, his breath leaving in a rush. Blood ran from his mouth, but he rose without hesitation. He wiped it away with the back of his hand, eyes locked on the towering shape before him. Carveth staggered, glaive still humming, blood seeping through broken armor, yet his grin remained. You bleed, Terran. You suffer as all flesh does. You are no god. When I kill you, your kind will know despair. Kane's voice was steady, almost quiet, but it cut through the chamber like a blade. I was never sent to be a god. I was sent to be the end. He lunged again, faster than before, every ounce of strength poured into the attack. His blade flashed in rapid strikes, exploiting every weakness Carveth had revealed. The Warlord met him with brute force, their weapons sparking with every collision, until Kane slipped inside the arc of the glaive and drove his combat knife upward beneath Carveth's jaw. The blade pierced deep, silencing the Warlord's roar in a gurgle of blood. The chamber fell still. Carveth's massive frame shuddered, his glaive clattering to the floor, its energy fading to nothing. His warriors stared in stunned silence as their leader sank to his knees. Kane twisted the knife free and let the body collapse with a final crash against the throne steps. Smoke and silence swallowed the chamber whole. Kane turned, his visor reflecting the ring of stunned soldiers. None moved. None dared. He leveled his rifle once more and spoke with calm finality. This is the fate of warlords who challenge Earth. Carry the message. Tell them the executioner came, and nothing remained. The soldiers parted, some lowering their heads, others backing away in silence. Kane left the throne room as easily as if it had been his own. In the holds below, prisoners stirred as the alarms ceased. Rourke led them forward, guiding the weak and wounded, until they reached the landing bay. Kane waited there, his armor scorched, his blade still wet. The freed captives looked upon him with a mixture of awe and dread. To them, he was no hero. He was the shadow behind their survival, the embodiment of a warning meant for others. Rourke approached, his voice raw but steady. You came for vengeance, not us. Kane's gaze met his, impassive. I came for Carveth. The rest was inevitable. Rourke clenched his fists, torn between gratitude and loathing. Yet he could not deny the truth. They lived only because Earth had sent not a savior, but something far more terrifying. The frigate departed as the alien stronghold burned behind them, its ships scattering without command, its legacy shattered in one night. The survivors huddled in silence, each glance at Kane a reminder of what had truly saved them. He stood apart, watching the stars, his face unreadable. On Earth, the report would be brief. Carveth executed. Survivors retrieved. Message delivered. But those who had seen it firsthand would remember more. They would whisper of the man who walked into the heart of an empire and brought it down with nothing but his will and his blade. They would remember that humanity, mocked as fragile, had unleashed something far worse than vengeance. As the frigate vanished into hyperspace, Kane remained still, his reflection caught in the viewport. His voice, spoken only to himself, was as cold as the void beyond. The galaxy asked if humanity was weak. Now it has its answer.